Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we are returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip on 3-star ranged legendary weapons with the Purveyor. And as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started here. So for our first weapon today, we actually got something pretty interesting. We got an Executioner's light machine gun with 25% faster fire rate and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the light machine gun is kind of an interesting weapon. It's a heavy gun, so it benefits from the heavy gun perks. And it has a very high rate of fire, as you can see with the 25% increased rate. It's at 205, which I believe is higher than any weapon other than the spin-up weapons like the Gatling Plasma and the ultrasight laser, Gatling laser, and so forth. So that makes it very interesting. And its damage per shot is a little bit low, which means that you're going to get a little bit more out of the Executioner's effect than you might with a lot of other weapons. So the Executioner's effect is actually one of the better effects in certain situations and on certain weapons. It gives you plus 50% damage, and it's important to note that, at least as far as I know, it's still multiplicative damage, which means that it's half of the damage that you actually see on your damage card, even with all of your perks and everything active. So that's a great thing right there. But the drawback is that the target has to be at 40% or lower health before you see any benefit whatsoever from it. It makes it very useful for big enemies like, behemoths and Mirelurk Queens and endgame bosses and such. So at least once you've got them down to that point anyway. But with the light machine gun, you're typically going to be putting several rounds on a target to put them down. So with this effect, you may actually be able to save yourself a round or two even with just everyday farming. So that's actually kind of interesting. This one might be worth trying out. The 25% faster fire rate, that is just a great effect on any automatic weapon and even some semi-automatic weapons, as I learned in a Weapon Spotlight video a couple weeks back. But it really shines, in my opinion, on the fully automatic weapons, and it's just really good here because it's just straight up increasing your damage per second. So the third star is a little bit disappointing, plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. It's not bad, especially considering that with the light machine gun having a little bit lower magazine size than a lot of the other heavy guns, you are going to probably find yourself reloading in combat a little bit more often than with some of those other weapons. But at the same time, if you've got armor in the 300 to 400 damage resistance range, then you're probably not going to be seeing a ton of benefit from that anyway. So I would definitely prefer to see a much better third star, but the first and second star do make this weapon very interesting. So let's go on ahead and see what else we get. And here we got a Furious Harpoon gun with plus 50% limb damage and plus 1 agility. So the Furious effect it's not one of my favorite effects at all, just because even on a fast-firing weapon, you're still going to have to put, I believe it's 10 shots on the target before you see the full benefit from the Furious effect. So you're really only going to get that on either very low damage weapons, on, at least bigger creatures like a Mirelurk Queen or a Scorch Beast or something like that, or against the endgame bosses. So it loses something there, but it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to be running around with any penalties or low health or anything like that. So it's not the worst effect, just not exciting. But especially on a weapon like this, where you're generally going to be reloading it after every shot, then it's just doing pretty much nothing. The plus 50% limb damage, that is not exciting to me. I'm a proponent of the idea that if you want to cripple your enemies, use the perks that give you a chance to cripple your enemies. Things are just going to work out better for you if that's what you're trying to do, I believe. So, at least in my experience. So, it does potentially give you some benefit, but again, I believe you're going to get your best benefit from that second star on a low damage, fast fire rate weapon. So yeah, again, not doing a whole lot there. Plus 1 agility, that's not bad. It's not a whole lot. It's a little bit of extra stealth. It's a little bit of extra AP. So you know, it's not a whole lot though, and I would always prefer to see a better third star than that, although it's definitely not the worst third star by any means. So, anyway, let's go on ahead and see what else we can get today. Well, this one was almost good. We got a Bloodied short pump action shotgun with bashing damage increased by 50% and 25% less VATS AP cost. So, as shotguns go, or at least pump action shotguns go, if the second star had been something much better, then this would be a god roll. The Bloodied effect is definitely the most damaging effect in the game. At the 20% threshold that most Bloodied players run around at for their health, it's giving you an extra plus 80% damage, and you're getting extra damage from Adrenal Reaction and Nerd Rage as well. So that's why so many players run around like that. And it's really not that difficult to stay alive at low health. I originally thought that it would be, and then I gave it a try one day, and it's really not, especially if you have the right perks. Yeah, you will definitely die occasionally a little bit. You'll die occasionally in situations where you would not have died as a full health build, but for the benefits, I think it's worth it. If you don't, that's totally understandable. The bashing damage increased by 50% is what really kills this weapon's overall. I mean, it's still a solid weapon, but it's just disappointing there because it does virtually nothing unless it's on a minigun with the Shredder mod. In that case, the bashing damage increased by 50% is actually very good, but in all other situations, it's basically crap because the bashing damage in this game is basically crap. So the 25% less VATS AP cost, that's great on any kind of a weapon that you can use in VATS, and shotguns are definitely an excellent choice for VATS weapons if you choose to use them that way. So getting both Bloodied and less VATS AP cost on the same weapon is kind of rare, so that's also very good. It's, like I say, it's just very disappointing for that second star, but I could still see, you know, a mid-level player being or lower being interested in this weapon just because the first and third star are both very good. So anyway, let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. Okay, well, we got ourselves another pump action shotgun. This time, Aristocrats with bullets exploding for area damage and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. In some ways, I actually think this one is probably better than the last one. The Aristocrats effect is, in my opinion, the best first star for full health builds aside from perhaps anti-armor, which is good for any build. The only real drawback with the Aristocrats effect is that you have to have 32,000 caps on your character to get the full 50% damage buff from it. That's not really that hard once you are relatively high level and have bought most of the plans and whatever else that you care about from, you know, the vendor bots, and have pretty good gear to where you're not, you know, needing to go around and buy the best things you can find from player vendors and things like that. So at that point, you know, the Aristocrats effect becomes very easy to keep that 50% damage bonus, with no penalties like the Junkies effect would give you. The bullets exploding for area damage, that is just one of the best second stars in the game for ranged weapons, so having it on a shotgun is also very good. It used to be just straight up overpowered on shotguns, now it's still very good on shotguns. The third star is probably the most disappointing on this, the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. You can definitely use this weapon in stealth. You can put a suppressor on it and run around. In fact, that's probably the way I would recommend doing that, but you don't have to by any means. But if you're doing so, you're going to get a little bit of benefit by hitting enemies, and potentially every one of your hits from the pellets, the 8 different pellets that you fire in the shot, might actually have a chance to generate that stealth field. I might have to test this out a little bit, because that could actually be very good on a shotgun. I hadn't even considered that. So yeah, I'd still prefer to see a better third star like the 25% less VATS AP cost, but overall this one is a very solid weapon, so not doing so bad so far today. Let's see what else Murmur's got for us. Alright, well this one's definitely not as good. We've got an Aristocrat's bow with plus 50% limb damage and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So we talked about the Aristocrat's effect already. It's, again, probably, at least in my opinion, the best first star for full health builds other than anti-armor, at least for damage output purposes. And so That's great, although the bow is... It's not... It's kind of a weapon that you don't really see many people running around with. So, it's slow. That's basically the big problem with it, is it fires slow. But it has excellent range, it is perfectly silent, so it does have some benefits. I've never really enjoyed using it in a game with guns. If you do, then great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think that many players are feeling that way about it. So the plus 50% limb damage, unfortunately, because the bow is a slower weapon that you have to reload after every shot, the 50% limb damage is really not going to do a whole lot for you here. And again, I think that if you want to cripple things, you're better off just using the perks. And I think bows have perks to cripple things, but I'm actually not 100% certain on that. So the third star, hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. Again, it's not really the effect that I would want to see on really any weapon. I think shotguns might be a little bit of an exception to that being a good perk because of the fact that they hit 8 times and potentially each one of those could generate the stealth field with every shot. But on a slower weapon like this, if you need more stealth bonuses, you're better off with just using chameleon armor or perks or whatever else. So overall, this one's a bit of a dud. Let's see what else we get. And we got another bow. Yay. So we got a Ghoul Slayer's bow with plus 25% damage while aiming and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So the last one was probably a little bit better, but this one does have a decent second star. But the Ghoul Slayer's effect is probably one of the less useful of the Slayer's effects. It's not that you're not going to be fighting ghouls somewhat regularly. I mean, they show up in daily ops, and if you're grinding for experience and you get tired of running West Tech over and over, you might go hit the golf club or Charleston Capitol building or the Burrows or something like that. So there's plenty of times when you're likely to be killing ghouls. It's just that you don't generally need all that much to put them down. They're generally pretty squishy. Sure, there's the big glowing ones, the big bloated ones, but, you know, I don't know that plus 50% damage on your bow is really going to make all that much difference when trying to put one of those down. The plus 25% damage while aiming is probably a very good effect on a bow, especially if you're the type of player who would not prefer to use this in VATS. I would, but, you know, again, everyone's different, so it's a solid effect and just 25% extra damage for aiming down the sights, and that's always a good effect, really, on any weapon. The hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, well, I'm not going to beat that dead horse. We talked about that on the last bow, so let's go ahead and move on to the next weapon. And here we've got an Exterminator's short hunting rifle with plus 50% VATS hit chance and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Exterminator's effect is potentially the least useful of the Slayer's effects. It competes with a couple of the others, but overall, there's just not a lot of times when you're going to be out actively hunting mirelurks and bugs, and unlike the ghouls, there's probably not, you're not going to see them typically show up in daily ops. Sure, you can see some bugs in some of them, depending on what you're fighting, but even that's somewhat rare. So yeah, and really I don't see that it's worth keeping a special weapon around for fighting mirelurks and bugs. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that's a very good effect. It makes it much easier for you to target the weak points, such as the head on most living enemies, or the thruster on the Mr. Gutsies, for example, and get some extra damage that way. And it also makes your VATS shots much more likely to hit, which, you know, makes it easier for you to get AP, or I'm sorry, not AP, but critical meter filled up and get some extra damage from your criticals. So, very good effect. It also gets some extra range for you, because it offsets some of the range drop-off past the range on your weapon card. Your weapon damage will still drop off past that range, but that's normally 50% for most weapons. So be aware of that, but sometimes it's still worth being able to get that damage. And then faster movement speed while aiming, I kind of consider that a bit of a dud of a third star, because if you've got the speed demon mutation, then it's doing nothing for you. And if you don't have the speed demon mutation, it could be useful for you, but really only if you're doing a lot of movement while you're aiming, which I don't think a lot of players are. I think most players typically aim, fire, stop aiming, move, stop, aim, fire. So, if you disagree with that, by all means, let me know. I'd love to hear about that. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next weapon. And here we've got a Mutant Slayer's Fat Man with plus 50% VATS hit chance and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Mutant Slayer's effect is one of the better Slayer's effects because there are just a lot of times when you're going to be going after super mutants, largely because of them being good experience and it's a good way to grind up levels. But also, they are not particularly squishy enemies, so keeping a specific weapon around for fighting super mutants is not a bad idea, although this is probably not the weapon you're going to do that with. The VATS hit chance, 50% VATS hit chance on this weapon, is interesting because it can make it very easy for you to hit your target and make the explosion land exactly where you want, which is very nice. One drawback to be aware of is that with launcher weapons like this, if you miss a VATS shot, there's a chance that your projectile will just kind of go off into nothingness and you won't ever get an explosion or anything from it. It's not necessarily a reason not to do it, but it's just something to be aware of. The plus 50% VATS hit chance is going to make that happen less often because you're going to hit your VATS hits more frequently. The faster movement speed while aiming is still pretty much a do-nothing effect, especially on a weapon like this, probably. Especially if you're using VATS with it, because when you're aiming down sights, that is not the same as using VATS. That's considered to be hip firing. Although things that give bonuses to hip firing don't apply to VATS, they would have to say bonuses to VATS. So, anyway, overall, this one's definitely a dud. We've got 2 more. Let's see what else we get. And here we've got a Stalker's 50 cal machine gun with plus 50% VATS hit chance and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Stalker's effect is, in my opinion, probably the worst first star effect in the game for ranged weapons at this point because unlike all of the other all the other legendary effects that at least have some potential utility, this one doesn't even actually work as best as I can tell because I have attempted to use VATS while not in combat with a weapon with the Stalker's effect and missed. So, but I do still have to pay the extra AP cost to fire at that point, so basically it's a drawback, not a benefit. The 50% VATS hit chance, that's good, although this isn't the kind of weapon you would really want that star on. But the 50 cal is one of the heavy guns that you could probably use a little bit more effectively in VATS than a lot of the other heavy guns. So if you're a heavy gunner who really, really wants to VATS a whole lot, the 50 cal might be one of your better choices. So, not necessarily the best choice, not necessarily the best second star there, but for somebody who has a particular playstyle, it could potentially be useful, but again, not with this first star. And then the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. That is, again, very good, but it is... And it also synergizes very well with the second star, but this is really not the weapon you want it on, although it's not the worst weapon for it. But again, with the first star, basically that kills this weapon. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And for our last roll, we got a Nocturnal Short Assault Rifle with plus 50% VATS hit chance and 25% less VATS AP cost. So unfortunately, this one could have been very good, but the Nocturnal effect is one of the lesser effects, generally speaking, at least in most people's opinion, of the first stars, because it does nothing during the day. So you're basically running around with a non-legendary weapon during the day, which is better than it used to be when they actually had a penalty, but still, it's not that exciting unless you're the type of player who will actually remember to switch your weapons based on in-game time of day. If you are, then you could actually get some use out of the Nocturnal effect because the bonus on it is solid. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, again, that's a very good effect. I talked about that earlier. Everything I said about it there applies here, but it's actually, this is the kind of weapon I would really want it on, because this is the sort of weapon that I would use almost exclusively in VATS. So being able to get that extra accuracy all the time is excellent. And then getting less VATS AP cost for it as well synergizes very well with the second star, and is, again, once again, very much the type of weapon that I would want to see this effect on. It's just unfortunate that the first star is not the type of first star that I ever really want to see. So anyway, we got a couple of decent ones today, so I'm not complaining. It's not one of our worst trips here, but not the best by any means either. But anyway, please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost you any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.